Hi everyone. Last week we drew a mandala for summer fun. At the same time, brought awareness to skin cancer. And as I had promised, today I'm answering the plethora of questions that I received, which is a good thing, regarding the UV light, tanning, or some questions like which UV rays are safe and so forth. So basically, in nutshell, one question was which UV rays are more harmful than others, and which we can call safe. And what about getting a healthy tan? So, looking at this question, I think I will start the explanation of what UV rays are. So, you have the full information and there is no confusion. So, UV, ultraviolet radiation, is part of the natural energy produced by the sun. And these are electromagnetic rays or the light. The whole spectrum we make, like are of electromagnetic radiation on which even the visible spectrum falls, the light that we can see. So the UV light refers to the region of EM spectrum between the visible light and the X-rays, with a wavelength falling between 400 nanometers and 10 nanometers. This is how wavelength is measured. And this electromagnetic radiation is not visible to the human eye because it has a shorter wavelength and higher frequency than the light our brain perceives as images. And so, what is radiation now? So, the radiation is described in terms of photons. And what are photons? Photons are the little energy carrying particles, like the quanta. So, photon energy increases with increasing frequency and decreasing wavelength. That is the shorter wavelength. So, it's an inverse relationship. And depending on their energy, photons are capable of being absorbed by the biological molecules. And at wavelengths shorter than 320 nanometers, they can break molecular bonds, causing damage which may be irreparable. So, the then coming to the kind of UV rays we have. Everyone has heard of UVA and UVB, I'm sure, and but there is another kind of UV radiation which is UVC. We don't need to worry about UVC because they are completely blocked by the Earth's atmosphere. So there is no danger from the atmosphere, and these are the extremely harmful rays. These have the shortest wavelength, 100 to 290 nanometers, and the only exposure that can happen in anyone with UVC is either the people who are working with welding torches or other artificial sources like the UV lamps that are designed to disinfect food, air, water, etc., to kill the microorganisms. So the rest of the two, the UVA, about the 95% of the rays that penetrate our atmosphere are the UVA layer rays, and they have the longest wavelength, 320 to 400 nanometers. And because of the long wavelength, they are less intense, but they penetrate deeper in the skin, and they are associated with skin aging. So UVA rays cause tanning, and the shorter wavelength of UVA, because we have a spectrum within the UVA rays, they can also cause sunburn. So, answering the question, what about a healthy tan? There is no such thing as a safe or a healthy tan. And not only that, but if the UVA can also penetrate through windows and heavy clouds. And in the past, in the far past, it was considered that UVA rays are not as harmful or they do not cause cancer, but years and years it has been proven now to contribute to the development of skin cancer. So, UVB light is next, which only 5% uh, is filtered into our atmosphere. Ozone layer will block 95%. So even with this low amount, it's more dangerous than the UVA rays because they penetrate and damage the outermost layer of the skin. So overexposure causes suntan, sunburn, and in severe cases, blistering, along with increasing the risk of skin cancer and other cellular damage. UVB rays can damage your skin year round, especially at high altitudes or even on reflective surfaces like ice and snow. What would be the best policy is that we should protect ourselves and use a sunscreen, uh, which is a broad spectrum SPF. So, what is SPF and how to choose the sunscreen product? SPF means it's the sun protection factor. It tells you how long sun's radiation, mainly UVB, because they are associated with the SPF. As I said, in the past, people didn't think the UVA was harmful. So this number tells you how long sun's radiation, mainly UVB and some UVA, would take to redden your skin when using that product compared to the time without the sunscreen. And UVA is connected now to the broad spectrum protection that you would see on the labels of the sunscreens. And because once it was proven that UVA rays are as harmful, the sunscreen manufacturers began adding ingredients to protect from both UVB and A. So the best way is just to look for the broad spectrum sunscreen. So, because there is always this question of whether they really do the harm, or some people are like, we cannot see the rays. So, what is at stake if you don't protect yourself from the harmful sun rays, the ones we cannot see? And UV exposure is a powerful attack on the skin. It creates damage that can range from premature wrinkles to the dangerous skin cancer. So even though both the UVA and UVB rays they differ in how they are affecting the skin, they both are harmful. So unprotected exposure to UVA and B, it will damage the DNA in the skin cells, meaning it breaks those intermolecular bonds, and it will produce genetic defects or mutations, and this is what leads to the skin cancer. And these rays can also cause the eye damage, which includes cataracts and eyelid cancers. So we need to protect our eyes as well with appropriate sunglasses. Basically, so just to give you very briefly, although you might have heard the names, that there are three kinds of skin cancers. They are proven to be produced by UV radiation. The two common kinds are basal cell carcinoma BCC and the squamous SCC. These are the common forms of skin cancer which appear on the sun exposed areas only. So if this can be discovered early enough, these two cancers, they are always curable. But then I would say, why take the chance? Let's just protect ourselves. And the third kind is melanoma, which is the most dangerous of all three. The UV exposure that leads to sunburn, as we saw above, that which UV exposure leads to sunburn, it plays the role in developing of melanoma. So the research has shown that UV rays that damage skin they can also alter a gene that suppresses the tumor, like like the tumor suppressing genes we have all over the place, but they are normally sleeping. So UV rays can activate those, which increases the risk of sun damaged skin cells developing the into skin cancer. So one important thing that I do want to mention about the UV rays is that damage from UV exposure is cumulative, It means that the effect of the exposure to UV solar radiation have additive character. So, meaning the human body cannot assimilate the energy absorbed by the UV radiation. And so, as you get exposed more, the skin cancer risk is increased over time. The body can repair some of the DNA damage, but not all of it. So the unrepaired damage, it will keep building up over time, and it will trigger the mutations that cause the skin cells to multiply rapidly, and that is what leads to the malignant tumors. So the degree of damage, it depends on intensity of the UV rays and the length of time your skin has been exposed without protection. So, location is a factor as well. And if you live where the sun is strong year around, your exposure level and risk increases. And once again, you can easily reduce your likelihood of developing skin cancer by taking care to protect yourself against the UV radiation. I'm showing this figure where you can find a rough description of how one can determine their own susceptibility in UV exposure by checking the skin color in conjunction with the frequency of sunburn incidences. So, if someone has a dilemma or they still have the iffy on whether they should be protected or what the UV rays can do, they should pick one of the colors here from this chart that is more sensitive to UV exposure. Okay, so the other question is, what about the tanning beds and tanning salons? Are we safe there? Or, like I said, there is no healthy tan. So, first of all, what is tanning? Tanning is your skin's self defense against burns from the UV rays. So the skin cells react to the UV rays by producing more pigment, that is the color, as a shield. However, too much exposure to these rays can cause wrinkling of the skin at an early age, skin rashes, and even eye injury. So sun lamps and the tanning equipment, they emit rays of UVA mostly. Exposure to the UVA radiation and maybe some UVB, whether from tanning equipment or from the sun, it's the same. The rays are the same. They increase your risk of developing skin cancer. And tanning bed lamps, typically they emit from 93 to 99% UVA rays and maybe 7 to 1% UVB. So that is harmful in itself. So if you were to have a 5 minute sunbed session, I'm going to give you a comparison that if you had a 5 minute sunbed session, it would convert to about 1 hour in the actual sun without protection. So the best step here also, if you see, is to avoid the tanning salons. Recently, I mean, I'm glad I got this question, otherwise, I may not have addressed it by myself. Some girls from college and university, they asked me about the UV lamps at the nail salon. And a really good question because the lamps that emit UV radiation, they have become standard at almost all nail salons, I'm assuming. And these are typically used to speed dry the regular manicures, and they are also required to set the gel manicures. So some of the lamps, here's a confusion that some lamps are called the UV lamps and others are called the LED lamps. But both of these lamps, LED and the typical UV lamp, they emit UV radiation. And predominantly, yes, they produce UVA, but we know that it has been linked to premature skin aging and skin cancer. So, although this is a lower risk than the tanning devices, but still, what can you do about it? So, I would still say play it safe, meaning avoid the UV lamps at the nail salons. Try air drying naturally and avoid the lamps altogether, or use an air blower or the fan without the UV lights. But if not, you could apply a broad spectrum sunscreen to the hands 20 minutes before your hands are exposed to the UV light. However, the caveat here is that this protection will not protect against the skin under the nails, so meaning the squamous cell carcinoma. So to avoid all that, it's better not to use the UV lamps. But this brings me to the question of, or the topic of the LED lights. And so lately there have been statements, and the manufacturers have been saying that LED does not produce UV radiation and they are safe. So this is not absolutely true. There is not as much information out there about LEDs, but we do know that standard LEDs, they create a minimal amount of UV rays, which is far less than the amount produced by the natural daylight, of course. And this is because there are phosphors within the LED lamp that convert the UV light to the white light. And the only LEDs that do emit a considerable amount of UV light are the brilliant blues. However, both LED and the UV wavelengths, they work in the same way. So regardless of the source, the rays we get exposed to are the same, of course. Of course, the duration of exposure matters and the wavelength is critical. So to reiterate, in summary, we learned that there is no UV radiation which is safe. And we cannot ever quantitate. We cannot say how much UVA that I'm exposed to, so I am not at risk. This doesn't happen. And the other thing would be, the best policy would be just to avoid certain things that we can. For example, the UV lamp at the nail salon or the tanning beds. But going out in the sun, of course, we are protecting ourselves with the broad spectrum sunscreen. Lastly, even if you are in the water, you need sunscreen, because I know quite a few people think we are in the water, so we are not exposed to the UV rays. That's not true. Rather, if you're heavily even sweating, then you have to apply your sunscreen every 2 hours. And the same goes for little children. So I hope this answers all the questions you might have. If there are more questions, I'll be happy to answer. You could even DM me or write in the comments. And take care. I'll see you next Monday.